My wife hosted a fake charity gala to cover her weekend affair. I still see the flashing blue and red lights in my mind sometimes, not from that night, but from the weeks before. Subtle things, you know? Like the way Sarah started locking her phone, or the late nights she'd claim were work emergencies when she was actually holed up in some downtown hotel suite, probably with him. I never suspected. Not really. Not until the gala. God, the gala. It was supposed to be the event of the year, the one her charity, Bright Futures for Kids, had been planning for months. Sarah, bless her heart, poured everything into it. Hours and hours, late nights, endless meetings. I thought it was dedication, pure and simple. Turns out, it was a damn good alibi. But before we get into all that, I want you guys to do me a favor. If you're finding this story resonates with you, hit that like button. And if you want to hear the rest of what happened, make sure you're subscribed and ring that notification bell so you don't miss part 2. Seriously, sharing this with a friend who might appreciate a raw, honest story like this means the world. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been blindsided like this? What would you have done? Okay, back to it. Sarah was a whirlwind of activity, a beautiful tornado of silk and ambition. She'd always been like that, driven, passionate. She wanted to make a difference, and Bright Futures was her baby. I'd supported her, of course, bought the expensive dresses, endured the endless fundraising calls, smiled at the awkward cocktail parties where I knew half the people there just to write a check. I was proud of her, genuinely. She was good at it too. People were drawn to her energy, her conviction. She could talk anyone into anything, rally a room with just a few well-chosen words. And the gala? It was supposed to be the culmination of all that, the big night. We'd booked the grand ballroom at the historic Astor Building, the one with the crystal chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls, and the sweeping marble staircase that made you feel like you were in a movie. The invitations had gone out months ago, embossed with gold foil, promising an evening of elegance, philanthropy, and, of course, a hefty donation to the children's programs. I remember the weeks leading up to it. Sarah was more stressed than usual, but I chalked it up to the pressure of throwing such a massive event. She'd be on the phone constantly, her voice tight with an urgency I'd grown accustomed to. "We need the silent auction items confirmed by Friday," she'd say, her brow furrowed. Or, "The caterer is giving me a headache. I swear they're trying to overcharge us." She'd be out late, working on seating charts, finalizing the guest list, coordinating with the event planners. I'd be home, making dinner, maybe catching up on some work myself, and I'd text her, "Need anything?" And she'd reply with a quick, "No, honey, just buried in work. Love you." And I'd believe it. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married for 10 years. 10 good years, I thought. Years filled with laughter, with shared dreams, with the comfortable rhythm of 2 lives intertwined. We had a beautiful home in the suburbs, 2 cars in the driveway, a dog named Buster. The kind of life most people dreamed of. The kind of life that, from the outside, looked perfect. But there were little things, weren't there? Tiny cracks in the facade that I'd dismissed. Like when she started meticulously organizing her calendar, color-coding everything, leaving no room for spontaneity. Or the new security features on her phone, fingerprint ID, and a passcode that changed every week. She said it was for privacy, to keep work-related information safe. I just nodded, assuming it was part of her busy, important life. Then there were the times she'd be out, and her phone would go straight to voicemail, even when she swore she'd be home by 9. She'd have a plausible explanation, of course. My battery died, or I was in the subway, no signal. And I, like a fool, would accept it. I trusted her. I loved her. The thought of her betraying me, of her being anything less than the devoted wife I believed her to be, was unthinkable. It was like imagining the sky falling. The night of the gala arrived, and Sarah was a vision. A stunning emerald green gown that shimmered under the ballroom lights, her hair swept up elegantly, her makeup flawless. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She was radiant, a perfect hostess, gliding through the room, greeting guests, her laughter tinkling like champagne glasses. I was by her side, playing the supportive husband, making small talk, shaking hands. I felt a surge of pride. This was her moment, and she deserved it. The ballroom was packed. Every important name in the city seemed to be there, dressed to the nines, sipping champagne, bidding on silent auction items. The energy was electric, a buzz of anticipation for the night ahead. The speeches were heartfelt. Sarah's own speech, of course, was particularly moving, talking about the desperate need for funding for these underprivileged kids. Her voice quivered with genuine emotion, and I swear I felt a lump in my throat. But then things started to unravel. It was subtle at first. A hushed conversation I overheard between Sarah and one of the event organizers, their voices low and urgent.
I caught a few words, "not enough," and "need to cover it." I brushed it off as logistical issues, the typical stress of a major event. Later, while Sarah was on stage accepting a standing ovation for her tireless work, I saw a man across the room. He was handsome, sharp suit, a confident air. He was watching her, not with the adoring gaze of a supporter, but with something possessive. And Sarah, when she glanced in his direction, her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. A flicker of recognition quickly masked. My stomach did a slow, cold roll. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overtired, that the champagne was getting to me. As the night wore on, the unease grew. I excused myself to the men's room, needing a moment to clear my head. When I returned, Sarah was no longer circulating. She was in a small, private alcove near the service entrance, talking on her phone, her back to me. Her voice was low, agitated. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It wasn't the tone of a woman discussing auction items. It was the tone of someone caught. I crept closer, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could see her hand shaking as she gripped the phone. And then, as I rounded the corner, she looked up, her eyes wide with panic. She quickly ended the call. "Everything okay?" I asked, my voice sounding strained even to my own ears. She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, honey, just dealing with a last-minute crisis. The band's sound system is acting up." It was a flimsy excuse. The band was already playing, a smooth jazz quartet filling the ballroom. But I didn't push. I couldn't, not yet. I just nodded, my gaze flicking to the service entrance behind her, a door that shouldn't have been ajar, a door that led to a dimly lit corridor, not the polished hallways of a five-star hotel. "I'm going to step outside for some air," I said, needing to escape the suffocating pretense. She nodded, her eyes darting back towards the corridor. "Okay."
Don't be long. As I walked away, I heard the faint sound of footsteps from the corridor, someone moving quickly, quietly. And then, a man's voice, low and urgent. "Sarah, we have to go." My blood ran cold. I stopped, my body rigid. I didn't want to believe what my ears were telling me. I didn't want to acknowledge the chilling certainty that was starting to crystallize in my gut. I turned back, just in time to see Sarah, her emerald dress a blur of motion, slip through the service entrance and disappear into the shadows of the corridor. The man I'd seen earlier, the one with the possessive gaze, was right behind her. They were gone. Vanished. Leaving me standing there, the opulent ballroom suddenly feeling like a gilded cage, the music and laughter a mocking soundtrack to my dawning horror. The charity gala, the glittering facade, it all felt like a carefully constructed lie. And for the first time, the full, terrifying weight of it crushed down on me. This wasn't just a late night at the office. This was something else entirely, something devastating. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of polite conversation fading into a deafening roar in my ears, a roar of betrayal I was only just beginning to comprehend. The red and blue lights weren't in my head anymore. They were a premonition. And the worst part was, I had no idea what I was going to do. The immediate aftermath was a blur of forced smiles and polite conversation. I retreated to the bar, ordering a double scotch, neat. The burn in my throat was a welcome distraction from the icy knot forming in my stomach. I watched Sarah's emerald dress disappear, my mind replaying the scene over and over. "We have to go." His voice low and urgent. Sarah's panic, the service entrance. It was all too real, too concrete to be a figment of my imagination. I told myself it was a mistake, a terrible misunderstanding. Maybe he was an event planner and they had a last-minute issue to address away from the crowd. But the possessive look, the furtive movement, the panic in her eyes, it all screamed something far more sinister. I took another gulp of scotch, the alcohol doing little to numb the growing dread. I was supposed to be her husband, her confidant. And here I was, a spectator to her secret life, catching glimpses of a reality I never knew existed. I rejoined the party, my movements stiff, my smile feeling like a cheap mask. Every glance felt like an accusation, every laugh sounded hollow. I scanned the room for the man with the sharp suit, the one who had sparked the first flicker of doubt in me earlier. He was nowhere to be seen. And Sarah, of course, was still missing. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they'd gone to check on the sound system or deal with a VIP issue. But my gut screamed otherwise. It was a cold, hard certainty that settled deep within my bones.
This wasn't about a sound system. This was about him and about her. The next hour was an excruciating exercise in self-control. I made small talk, nodded at the right times, even managed to place a bid on a ludicrously expensive piece of art for the silent auction, my hand trembling slightly as I wrote down my paddle number. Sarah reappeared eventually, gliding back into the ballroom as if she'd merely stepped away for a moment. She looked flustered, her eyes a little too bright, her smile a little too wide. She came straight to me, her hand finding my arm. "Darling, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her breath smelling faintly of champagne and something else. Something floral and expensive, a perfume I didn't recognize. There was a minor emergency with one of the sponsors, had to deal with it personally. I looked into her eyes, searching for any hint of the truth, any crack in the polished veneer. I saw only practiced composure. "Everything's all right now?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "Of course," she said, her grip tightening on my arm. "Just a hiccup. The important thing is, the gala is a massive success. Look at this turnout, darling. We're going to make a real difference for these kids." She squeezed my arm, her eyes pleading for me to accept her explanation, to let the night continue as planned. And I did, because the alternative was too terrifying to confront. Not then, not in the middle of her triumph, surrounded by hundreds of people. The thought of causing a scene, of shattering this carefully constructed illusion in front of everyone, was unbearable. So I smiled, I nodded, and I let her lead me back into the throng, my mind a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Guilt warred with suspicion, love with a burgeoning, sickening rage. The drive home was a silent testament to the chasm that had opened between us. Sarah chatted about the gala's success, her voice light and effervescent, completely at odds with the somber mood that hung heavy in the car. I offered monosyllabic responses, my gaze fixed on the dark suburban streets blurring past. I kept replaying the service entrance scene, the man's voice, her panicked retreat. Who was he, and why the secrecy? The questions gnawed at me, each one a fresh stab of betrayal. When we got home, the house was eerily quiet. Buster, our golden retriever, greeted us with his usual enthusiastic tail wags, oblivious to the tension radiating from his owners. Sarah immediately started talking about breakfast, about needing to debrief with her team in the morning. I just nodded, my mind elsewhere. I watched her move around the kitchen, her grace and elegance now tinged with a new, unsettling ambiguity. Was this the same woman I'd married? The woman I thought I knew inside and out? Later, lying in bed, the familiar comfort of our bedroom felt alien. Sarah lay beside me, her breathing soft and even, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within me. I stared at the ceiling, the silence amplifying the noise in my head. I thought about her phone, the passwords, the late nights. All those moments I dismissed as stress or dedication now seemed like deliberate obfuscations, a carefully laid trail of breadcrumbs leading to this very moment of realization. I couldn't sleep. The weight of it all was too much. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and went to my study. The room was my sanctuary, filled with books and the quiet hum of my computer. I sat at my desk, the cool wood a familiar comfort. I knew I shouldn't. I knew that digging deeper would only hurt more. But I couldn't stop myself. The need to know, to understand, was overwhelming. I opened her laptop, a sleek silver machine she'd gotten a few months ago. She'd left it unlocked on her desk, a rare oversight. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. This felt like a violation, a crossing of a sacred boundary. But the trust had already been broken. What was one more transgression? I started with her email. Nothing immediately obvious. Mostly work-related correspondence, thank you notes from donors, event planning updates. But then I scrolled back, further and further, and there it was. A thread of emails, sent from a private account, not her usual work address. The subject lines were innocuous, regarding the upcoming weekend, quick question, confirming details. But the content? The content was a dagger. They were from a man named David, and the exchanges were intimate, filled with a longing and affection that sent a chill down my spine.
They talked about stolen moments, about the thrill of their secret meetings, about planning future rendezvous. There were references to hotels, to weekends away, to a shared intimacy that went far beyond friendship. One email, sent just 2 days before the gala, read, "Can't wait for a little escape this weekend, my love. Thinking of you constantly. Just knowing your mind, even for a few stolen hours, makes everything else bearable." My heart hammered against my ribs. Stolen hours. A few days before the gala. That must have been when she was supposedly attending that out-of-town conference. I kept reading, my breath catching in my throat. The sheer volume of their correspondence was staggering. It wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a sustained affair. And the tone. It wasn't just about physical intimacy. There was an emotional connection, a depth of feeling that terrified me. David wasn't just a fling. He was someone Sarah had clearly fallen for. Then I found it. A booking confirmation for a luxury hotel downtown, a suite booked for the very weekend of the gala. The dates aligned perfectly with her supposed work emergencies. The reservation was under David's name, and the recipient of the confirmation email? Sarah's private account. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold the mouse. I scrolled through more emails, searching for any mention of the gala, for any connection. And then I found a series of messages exchanged with an event planner discussing budget shortfalls for the gala. It was in response to one of these emails that Sarah had written, "Don't worry, I have a plan to cover the shortfall. This event must go off without a hitch. It's too important." My blood ran cold. Her plan, the charity gala, it wasn't just an alibi. It was a cover for her affair. She had used the entire event, the months of planning, the hundreds of guests, the philanthropy, as a smokescreen for her weekend with David. The money, the stress, the late nights, it was all for him. My God, she'd even used me, my support, my belief in her cause as part of her elaborate deception. The thought made me physically sick. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the revelation crushing me. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot and bitter. 10 years. 10 years of what? Of shared laughter, of whispered secrets, of building a life together. Had it all been a lie? Was I the fool? The man who believed in his wife's dedication, her passion, her love. I needed to confront her. I had to. But the thought of her face, the practiced innocence, the manufactured tears, filled me with a hollow dread. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this was just the beginning. The gala was over, but the real disaster was just unfolding. I closed the laptop, the click echoing in the silent study. I walked out into the hallway, the darkness of the house pressing in on me. I stood outside our bedroom door, listening to her soft, even breathing. She was asleep, dreaming her innocent dreams, while my world had just imploded. I could go in there, wake her up, demand answers. I could shatter the illusion, unleash the torrent of my pain and rage. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to see her face when she realized she'd been caught. I walked into the living room, the large windows overlooking the dark backyard. The moonlight cast long shadows across the manicured lawn, making familiar shapes seem menacing. I sank onto the couch, the plush cushions offering no comfort. The flashing blue and red lights weren't in my mind anymore. They were the harsh, unforgiving glare of the truth. I had been blind, willfully ignorant, and now the consequences of that blindness were about to come crashing down. I thought about David, the man in the sharp suit. I imagined his face, his voice, the life he shared with Sarah behind my back. A wave of pure, unadulterated hatred washed over me, a feeling so potent it almost scared me. What was I going to do? How could I ever look at her again, knowing what I knew? The silence of the house was deafening, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. I was trapped in a nightmare, and the dawn felt impossibly far away. I closed my eyes, but the images of those emails, those stolen weekends, burned themselves onto the backs of my eyelids. The betrayal was a physical ache, a hollow space where my trust used to be. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that I would never be the same. The silence in the house was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. I stayed on the couch, the moonlight striping the floor, until the first hint of dawn bled through the curtains. It was a pale, exhausted light, mirroring the state of my own soul. I couldn't go back to bed, couldn't pretend to sleep. So I made coffee,
strong and black, and sat at the kitchen island, watching the sky lighten, each passing minute a torturous confirmation of what I knew. Buster, sensing the shift in atmosphere, lay at my feet, his big brown eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. He knew something was wrong. Animals always did. Sarah eventually emerged, a soft hum escaping her lips as she padded into the kitchen. She looked rested, composed, the ghost of a smile playing on her lips. It was a vision of domestic bliss, a scene I'd witnessed 1,000 times, but tonight it felt like a performance, a masterful deception. She poured herself a cup of tea, her movements fluid, unconscious. "Morning, sleepyhead," she said, her voice still husky with sleep. She glanced at me, her smile whining slightly. "You're up early." I didn't respond. I just watched her, the steam from my mug curling upwards, blurring the edges of my vision. I was waiting for her to notice, waiting for the crack. She took a sip of her tea, then turned to me fully, her brow furrowing slightly. "Everything okay?" The question hung in the air, innocent, guileless. And that's when I saw it. A flicker of something in her eyes, a momentary tightening of her jaw, a minuscule, almost imperceptible shift in her posture. It was the barest hint of unease, the smallest ripple in her placid surface. She'd noticed my silence. She'd noticed the way I was looking at her. "We need to talk, Sarah," I said, my voice low, rough. It wasn't an accusation, not yet. It was a statement of fact. The calm before the storm. She put her mug down, her movements suddenly more deliberate. The faint smile vanished, replaced by a carefully neutral expression. "About what?" I met her gaze, and for the first time, I felt a surge of something beyond the icy dread. Anger. A hot, searing anger that threatened to consume me. "About David. About your emergency at the gala. About those emails." The color drained from her face. Just a fraction, but enough. Her eyes widened, and for a split second, the mask slipped entirely. I saw pure, unadulterated panic. It was the same look I'd seen when she'd skirted away from me at the party. The same furtive fear. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice a tight whisper. Her hands clenched at her sides. "Don't you?" I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I walked over to her laptop, which I had left on the island. I opened it, turning the screen towards her. The emails were still there. The thread from David. The hotel booking. She stared at the screen, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She looked trapped, cornered.
The practiced composure I'd seen for years had evaporated, leaving behind a raw, exposed vulnerability. This isn't what it looks like," she finally managed, her voice trembling. Tears began to well up, but they looked different now. Not tears of remorse, but of desperation. "Then tell me, Sarah," I said, my voice still dangerously calm. "Tell me what it is like. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been lying to me. For months, maybe years. It looks like you've been living a double life." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. "No, it's not like that. It's complicated." "Complicated?" The word was a bitter laugh. "You know what's complicated, Sarah? 10 years of marriage, a shared life, a home, a dog. All of that is complicated when one half of it is building a secret life with another man." "It wasn't like that," she pleaded, reaching out a hand, which I recoiled from. "It was a mistake, a terrible, awful mistake." "When? When was the mistake, Sarah? The emails span months. The hotel booking, the conference that wasn't a conference. When exactly did this mistake start?" My voice was rising now, the carefully constructed calm beginning to fray. She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I don't know. It just happened." "It just happened?" I repeated, the absurdity of it all almost making me laugh, a harsh, broken sound. "You think it just happened? You think you just happened to fall into an affair? You happened to book hotel rooms and lie about where you were going? You happened to use the charity gala, something you claimed to be so passionate about, as an alibi? She looked up, her face contorted with pain. The gala, that was important to me. It is important. That had nothing to do with David. Oh, really? I scoffed. Because it looked to me like your plan to cover the shortfall was just another lie, another way to keep your secret life going, another way to use me, to use our life together to fund your escape with him. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and damning. She flinched as if I'd struck her. That's not fair, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Fair? I walked around the island, closing the distance between us. I could smell her perfume, the same one I'd caught a whiff of at the party, the one I didn't recognize. It smelled like deception. What's not fair, Sarah, is me spending 10 years believing I was married to someone who loved me, when all along you were loving someone else. What's not fair is me trusting you, building a life with you, while you were sneaking around behind my back. What's not fair is this. I gestured between us, at the ruins of our home, our marriage. Her eyes were wide, pleading, please, don't do this. We can fix this. Fix this? I shook my head, a profound sadness washing over the anger. How do we fix this, Sarah? How do we unknow this? How do we unfeel the last few months, the last few years? How do we erase David from the picture? Because he's not just a casual fling, is he? You told him you loved him. You planned a life with him. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She just stood there, tears streaming down her face, her silence a damning confession. I saw you, I said, my voice dropping back to a low, dangerous tone, at the party, with him, the service entrance, the way you looked at him, the way he looked at you. It wasn't a friendly glance, Sarah. It was possessive, and you were terrified. She finally broke. Her shoulders slumped, and a strangled sob escaped her. He makes me feel things, Mark. Things I haven't felt in a long time. The words hit me like a physical blow. Things I haven't felt in a long time. What did that even mean? Had our marriage become so devoid of feeling? Had I failed her so completely that she'd had to seek it elsewhere? The guilt, sharp and unexpected, pricked at me, momentarily eclipsing the rage. But it was quickly swallowed by the enormity of her betrayal. And what about me, Sarah? I asked, my voice raw. What about what I feel? What about the fact that I love you? Or I thought I did? What about the vows we took? The future we planned? Was all of that just a performance for you? She shook her head frantically. No, Mark, you know that's not true. I love you, I do. You love me, but you're sleeping with someone else, I said, the contradiction so stark it was almost laughable. You love me, but you're lying to me, deceiving me, using me. That's not love, Sarah. That's something else entirely. I turned away from her, walking back to the window. The sun was fully up now, bathing the kitchen in a harsh, unforgiving light. It illuminated every dust mote, every imperfection, every broken piece of our life. I looked through your emails, I said, my voice quiet again, but laced with a steel I hadn't known I possessed. She made a small, choked sound. And you know what's the worst part? I turned back to her, my eyes burning. It's not just the cheating. It's the scale of it. It's the calculated deception. It's the fact that you used something so important to me, something we built together, as a cover for your affair. That's what I can't get past. That's what I can't forgive. She took a hesitant step towards me. Mark, please, we can go to counseling. We can talk about this. I made a mistake, a terrible, stupid mistake, but it doesn't have to be the end. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face was tear-streaked, her eyes red-rimmed, her body language screaming desperation. She looked like a woman caught in a lie, a woman trying to salvage something. But all I saw was the woman who had systematically dismantled my trust, who had built a parallel life right under my nose, the woman who had made me feel like a fool. I don't think we can, Sarah, I said, the words tasting like ash. I don't think I can ever look at you the same way again. How can I? Every time I see you, I'll see David. I'll see the lies. I'll see the service entrance. I'll see the stolen weekends. I'll see the woman I thought I knew, and I won't recognize her. A fresh wave of sobs racked her body. Don't say that, please. I have to say it, I said, my own voice breaking, because it's the truth, and I can't pretend anymore. I can't pretend this didn't happen. I can't pretend I'm not shattered. I can't pretend that the last 10 years haven't been alive. I walked past her, towards the back door, towards the outside.
The air was crisp and cool, a welcome shock after the suffocating heat of the kitchen. Buster whined at my feet, his tail giving a tentative thump. "Stay here, boy," I said, my voice rough. I needed to walk. I needed to breathe. I needed to put as much distance as possible between myself and the wreckage of my life. I walked out of the house, not looking back. The familiar streets of our suburban neighborhood, once a symbol of our stability, now felt like a mockery. Each manicured lawn, each neatly trimmed hedge, was a testament to the illusion of perfection that had been so easily shattered. I walked for a long time, the rising sun casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to stretch into infinity. The world was waking up, but my world had ended. There was no grand pronouncement, no dramatic confrontation left in me.
Just a hollow ache, a profound emptiness where love and trust used to reside. I had confronted her, and she had confessed in her own broken way. But the confession hadn't brought relief, only a deeper, more profound despair. The movie was over, and the credits were rolling on a tragedy I hadn't seen coming. I kept walking, the rhythm of my steps a solitary drumbeat against the burgeoning day. The pain was still there, a gaping wound, but something else was starting to surface. A grim, weary resignation. A dawning realization that the man who had walked into that house last night was not the same man who was walking away from it now. He had believed in happily ever after. This man knew that sometimes the story just stops. It breaks, and you're left with the pieces and the long, uncertain road ahead, trying to figure out how to put them back together, or if they can even be put back together at all. The sun felt warm on my face, but it couldn't touch the chill that had settled deep within my bones. I just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, the only thing I knew how to do.